It's March, and another humble choice is available. If you missed my update last month, I've been spending a bit more time with the games, seeing a few of them to completion, and letting you know how long I spent on others, so that's why this video comes a little later. With an early reveal of 12 games, will this month's selection put a spring in your step? Let's find out in this humble choice review. Available as both a Steam and Epic key, up first is Control, a mystery FPS action adventure that seems to have arrived on every games deal service possible. It's a game I've played twice, at launch on the PS4 and on completion with the ray trace features of PC. The gameplay you'll be seeing here is from trailers, as I don't want to spoil anything, whether that be story or location, by using post-game footage. Venturing into the oldest house, across the game you'll be suited with a variety of what can only be described as superpowers. Lots of my enjoyment of the game came from discovering these powers for myself, but if you've seen a power in any superhero production, minus creating a false sitcom reality, you'll most likely find something similar in Control. Gameplay, gunplay, and controls are tight and responsive, making destroying his enemies a real joy. Control also has a good difficulty level. I can't remember myself being stuck for hours, but I also encountered a challenge with some encounters. The game, especially with RTX enabled, looks stunning, and with DLSS turned on, I could play at a nice 60 FPS on my RTX 2070 with settings to the max. Even without the RTX features, the rich world and lore of Control is worth exploring. Mood-wise, the game sets a good balance between horror and sunshine and rainbows. Moving through eerily silent hallways put me on edge. Most of the time, I was a powerhouse, dealing with enemies with loud explosions and frenzy. On the topic of lore, the game is packed with it in the best possible way. If you'd rather not read dossier upon dossier of text, then the main narrative will make sense, but with odd puppet TV shows and redacted messages, I found myself reading a lot more of this extra content than I usually would in games. The game also features one of my all-time favourite gaming moments. You'll definitely notice it when you play. Overall, it's pure fun, and if you think you'd like a mystery game charged with a magnitude of superpower, Control is definitely worth the cost of admission, and that's just the first game. Next up is a turn-based tactics game set in the XCOM universe. When XCOM 2 was available in the bundle, I played a good 17 hours before realising that my mismanagement in the item supply, core assignment and mod navigation meant I was unable to progress, just a few more turns away from the dreaded game over screen. I really like the gameplay of turn-based tactics, and the in-level action of Chimera Squad is great. The game uses a breach system, where units can be assigned different entrances to break into the next room. Once these doors are broken, enemies are surprised, and the over-the-shoulder view that's expected from XCOM comes into play. Aside from this breach system, combat is fairly similar to that of other games from the turn-based tactics genre. You'll be controlling units, moving their location, and firing the poor enemies that just so happen to stand in the firing line of a weapon. Chimera Squad takes on a slightly lighter tone than XCOM 2, with a cartoon art style and character dialogue. One of my favourite parts of the game was the soundtrack, which sounds like it could be out of any high-stakes heist film score. Unfortunately, the game still contains the unit management and scientific research tabs in between the gameplay, which is a feature I personally don't enjoy. Reading up on a few sites, it unfortunately seems that there's quite a few ways to fail a campaign. I don't mind hard games, but when all progress is lost after a dozen or so hours, it soured my experience previously. As such, Chimera Squad isn't a game I'll be returning to, but you may be more accepting of a campaign which can be failed. Elex is an open-world ARPG combining fantasy and jetpacks. The beginning of the game gave me a strong feeling of Halo. My character crash-landed over a mountain, and after a few days of unconsciousness, I woke with no armour and just a stick to fight with. Of course, you can't have a protagonist without weapons or a suitable defence, so meeting a member of the Berserker faction named Durus, I was led to a fantasy village that doesn't like technology. Surprisingly, that introduction took me an hour, with a few battles in between. Visually, the game felt like a remaster, with a heavy focus on the lighting system. When the sun shines in the perfect spot, it really brings the world to life, but in darker caves, the game looks older than 3 years, and has a strange effect which mirrors eyes adjusting to light. In a third-person perspective, the gameplay is lock-on focused, using light and heavy attacks to hit alien creatures. The combat works, and I think that's the most I can say. it was mostly a mashing of mouse clicks. The game also features voice acting, and once again it works, but I felt no real empathy or connection to the characters. Admittedly, an hour of the characters might not make me truly connect, but a 5-time exchange deciding whether to visit ruins or not didn't help me emphasise at all. There are some positives in my experience though. I've yet to find a game which features jetpacks which I haven't enjoyed controlling, and Elex is no different. Overall, Elex clearly isn't a game for me. It feels slightly underpolished, and my gripes with the combat means that I prefer to spend my time on an action title with, well, better action. Kingdom 2 Crowns is a self-proclaimed micro-strategy game. I don't have much experience with the Kingdom series, but it played very similarly to New Lands, which I've briefly played. Side-scrolling across a forest environment, money must be earned, which in turn can be used as a patronage system to get the normal folk to become Kingdom folk. The beauty of this game really lies in its simplicity. Archers bring back coins, a visiting tradesman provided me with coins daily, and my construction crew chopped down trees at my wishes. My game reset twice over my hour playthrough. The first was down to sticky keys, and the second was my wrongdoing. Without any coins in hand, thieves took the opportunity to steal my crown, and subsequently my life, in a Sonic the Hedgehog losing rings fashion. Then, the ghost of my old character guided the next royal. I'm still in the first area, so not sure what happens in the future, but it didn't appear as if too much progress was lost. Visually, the game's pixel art looks nothing short of incredible, and combined with a dynamic soundtrack, I love losing myself in the game for an hour. If the fantasy visuals don't appeal to you, then there's even some free DLC that alters how the game appears, as well as adding a few distinct features. Kingdom 2 Grounds most likely isn't a game I'll play until completion, if such a thing exists. Instead, I'll open up the game every now and then, check on the locals, and watch my kingdom grow. Next is WWE 2K Battlegrounds, an unapologetically arcade WWE experience. I went into this one with no prior knowledge of WWE, so names, commentators or the superstars could just as well be made up especially for this game. I'm clearly not the target audience for this, but my experience was okay. The game fully embraces its arcade quality, which I like seeing. Takedowns are overly dramatic, and there's an almost superpower aspect to a few of the special abilities. I tried out most of the modes, and got absolutely destroyed in the multiplayer King of Castle style mode. The story here seems substantial in terms of content. Scrolling through the levels, there's a variety of levels of comic strips in between dealing with the narrative. Unfortunately, I couldn't get past one specific moment of the story, as in pursuit of gaining dollars to escape the ring, I was simply unable to press my triggers quickly enough to escape a grapple. I tried switching to my DualSense, but the game refused to accept that new controller. I'm most likely doing something wrong with my button entry, but I feel like I played enough to get a good grasp of the gameplay. For a wrestling game, combat was fun, stacking combos before pinning the opponent down, hopefully resulting in a victory. For WWE fans, I can give a recommendation, and for those that enjoy arcade fighters, it's definitely worth a go if you get in the bundle anyway. Hotshot Racing is a racing game inspired by the arcade classics, with heavy utilisation on the drift. First up, controls are tight, which makes racing exciting. By drifting around corners, there's a boost available by pressing A on the controller, a feature I accidentally discovered while testing whether my button worked on my slightly overused Stadia controller. The main campaign of Hotshot Racing is short, consisting of 5 GPs with 4 races each. In total, completing every Grand Prix took a little over an hour. With a small selection of races, each with their own stereotypical voice lines, there's certainly a focus on quality and not quantity. As someone who enjoys shorter games, I liked being able to experience all the tracks in one session, and with varying locations and a fantastic soundtrack, it's an hour that I'd encourage everyone to spend their time on, and that's not even mentioning the other race modes or multiplayer. Peaky Blinders Mastermind is a stealth puzzler based on the TV show of the same name. It's a game that's presumably produced by Christopher Nolan, using a timeline to rewind and fast forward time. For example, a door may be locked, so by using Thomas Shelby's mind control powers, I use an alley to pull down the lever, rewound the time and let Shelby pass through. It sounds simple in writing, but I found myself getting frustrated a fair bit in the 40 minutes I played. Changing the timeline, characters travelled to a place I didn't anticipate, and keeping on top of 3 controllable characters felt confusing. The world building and graphics are great, as I really enjoyed the Dockyard location. The soundtrack also sounded good, with a mysterious edge. With no voice acting, the music does a job of providing the atmosphere. It's a shame with the puzzles, as I think this would be great as a standard isometric stealth game, sneaking around enemy viewpoints and soaking in the industrial Birmingham. As someone who hasn't seen the show, the story is a prequel to Season 1, so it felt easy to understand and filled with some decent intrigue. At just 10 levels and a how long to beat time of 5 hours, puzzle fans who want to try something short and different may want to take a look at Mastermind. As for me though, I won't be returning. If you played Verlet's Swing a few months back, you'll be familiar with the gameplay of Cyberhook, a speedrunning grappling hook game. Equipped with a grappling hook and the ability to slow down time, the game consists of a series of levels across colourful platforms, all set in an 80s aesthetic. If you've ever seen the image of the neon mountains and sun, then you'll be familiar with the style of the game. Combined with a retro wave soundtrack, which is good, if a little bit repetitive, I really enjoyed my time with this one. It worked well as a little game to play in between video calls or whilst listening to a podcast at the same time. My recommendation comes with a few caveats though. First off, in the settings, under the speedrun tab, toggle on the auto-release hook button. Similarly, turn off the screen shake multiplier. Manually detaching after each swing, as well as having the screen violently shake at high speeds, seems like an incredibly bizarre design choice to have on by default, especially for a game focused so much on achieving a short level completion time. There's vague allusions to a story. I think you're stuck in a level or a digital world or something like that. It's definitely not at the forefront of the game, and I didn't pay much attention. Cyberhook's main draw is with its high amount of well designed levels and fun, and with 90 minutes at time of writing, I have no plans in stopping, and I'd find it hard to discover someone who doesn't like the gameplay at least a little bit of Cyberhook. Pesterquest is a game I reviewed back in the Bundle for Racial Justice review, and as such, my thoughts remain the same, so this is what I said then. Pesterquest is a series of visual novels set in the Hiveswap/Homeswap universe. To begin with, I've only played a little bit of Hiveswap Act 1 a couple of years back, so because of this, I don't understand any of the references or characters that the game refers to. From what I can tell, the idea is that each of the 14 volumes revolves around making friends with a character from one of the other games in the universe. I played the first volume and found the dialogue quite clever and funny. However, as someone who typically doesn't enjoy visual novels, and without any knowledge of the game's universe and characters, I won't be returning. If you're a fan of the Hiveswap and Homeswap games, this is a new game in the series, and has very positive reviews. I've played a bit more of Pesterquest for this review, and like earlier, the dialogue was still well written, but ultimately, visual novels and the overall universe of the game doesn't appeal to me. One thing that I didn't comment on in my original review is the awesome soundtrack. Starting fairly relaxed, the music suddenly comes alive with percussion and bass. It's really good, and perfect for a visual novel, especially a slightly surreal one such as Pesterquest. Wildfire is a stealth puzzle platformer where villagers must be rescued from the clutches of evil. With fiery powers and a pixel art landscape, get ready to see the world up in flames. Linear levels contain enemies who can either be startled by lighting the world around them or quietly pass by. With a checkpoint in the middle, villagers must be guided or freed from prison and then taken to the end of the level. It's fairly simple stuff, but the abilities of fire flames make sneaking around a level stand out from other stealth games. I haven't played too many 2D stealth games, and Wildfire has made me realise that 3D stealth is something I enjoy much more. There's nothing bad about Wildfire from a gameplay perspective. The pixel art is fantastic, there's a great soundtrack, and the environmental physics are great. Ultimately though, this one just didn't click with me. If a 2D stealth game sounds appealing to you, then it's certainly worth a go. For me though, I prefer an over-the-shoulder view of a bald-headed agent, and my platformers with a bit more speed and reflex. This month's multiplayer offering comes in the form of Boreal Blade, a melee fighting game with a directional based combat system. Against players, you'd hopefully be drawing your sword in a fashion similar to Kingdom Come Deliverance. Unfortunately, there's not much more I can say about this one, as unable to connect to the multiplayer servers, getting an invalid password screen, even on quick play. Perhaps this may be as there were simply no matches available thanks to time zones, but it's unfair for me to give my verdicts on a game I haven't played. Still, the music of the tutorial was good. Ageless is a game I reviewed for Rapid Reviews UK last September, so I'll be using my review from there in the video. I'll leave a link in the description if you want my full thoughts, but here's an abridged version. Whilst I reviewed the Switch version, many of my thoughts, aside from the controls, withstand. Ageless is a puzzle platformer with a unique time manipulation mechanic. Whilst it may appear to be a pretty standard platformer on the surface, the game predominantly focuses on a unique time mechanic. Chimera, the protagonist, uses a bow which can either advance or send back an object or animal in time. For example, the opening levels feature a dolphin who, by using the bow, can be changed into a whale for a bouncy platform. This feature helps Ageless stand out from the pixel platformer genre, and even the puzzle genre in general. The time mechanic is something I haven't played before, and adds a real depth to the puzzles on offer. Difficulty wise, its aging/de-aging system takes some time to get used to, and I must admit that the tutorial was often used after a few attempts. Once I was finally aware of the solutions, then admittedly they made sense, and weren't too far-fetched. Although the game is mostly puzzles, there are a few light platforming moments, but it's definitely a game geared for puzzle fans. I must admit that I haven't played Celeste before, but from looking at screenshots I can see how similar the games look. I very much like the pixel art style, with the colour palette changing in each area. The story revolves around Kiara's gift, with a focus on mental health. As much as it's good to see this tackled in games, dialogue often felt forced and cliché, with the hero constantly telling those around her to confront their own battles. Still, visually and mechanically, Ageless is a fun puzzler, and definitely worth a go. This month's Humble Original is Ruinraiders Unknown Menace, the second turn-based tactics game in this bundle. For good or for worse, it's everything I've come to expect in a game of this genre. Move units, shoot enemies, repeat. There's a trio of animals, one of which is a dog, which lets out a whimpering noise when shot, which is why I pay special attention to protecting this canine. In a roguelike fashion, my units explored the procedurally generated cave system, earning currency and items like grenades by opening treasure chests before advancing to the next floor. It's all very simple, and there's definitely an if it works don't fix it approach to design from the run I've played so far. Ruinraiders doesn't do anything bad, but with Chimera Squad in this bundle, I can see people moving towards an actual XCOM game rather than the one inspired by the series. Overall, this choice bundle offers a fantastic selection. Control for $12 in addition to other great games like Kingdom 2 Crowns and Hotshot Racing, not to mention that I'm cyber hooked on the grappling hook title, is undeniably a great deal. If you own Game Pass, you'll find Control and Hotshot Racing via Xbox on the Surface already, but with Chimera Squad and a bunch of well polished indies, I'd still recommend this bundle. It's also good seeing the option of a Steam and Epic key. With all games included once again, it seems that the choice branding is for what platform you choose your games for, more so than anything else. And that's how I felt about this month's Humble Choice. Thanks for watching the video until the end. What do you think of the new Time of Bundle and review release? Let me know in the comments.